F-Zero meets Burnout is the opening hook I'm going with to describe the Speed Racer video game, based on the Speed Racer movie, based on the Speed Racer 60s anime, based on the Speed Racer 60s manga, all of which very much feel like they translate well into a video game by simply revolving around racing and by having the distinctive styles that they do. The 2008 movie, directed by the Wachowskis in particular, even looks like a video game with its colourful, trippy, cheesy CGI aesthetic, an aesthetic which has since helped bring a decent cult following to this movie. It's only fitting then that the Wii and PS2 tie-in game by New Zealand's biggest game dev, Shay Interactive, shout out to those guys, has also garnered something of a cult following over the years, and it also captures a beautifully trippy style. I'll just shut up for a second and let you watch and especially listen.
Don't pay for that. Enjoy the little wins, but the last one, sweet like sugar. What do we see?
The music here just goes so hard, and it's weird in all the best ways with some strange instrumentation, especially with the percussion, and as you heard, it evolves a lot during the races. The visuals are colourful and intense enough to match, and they're surprisingly graphically impressive. This is one of the better looking Wii games around, and it's great that the frame rate mostly remains smooth and consistent, especially with the massive levels with detailed backgrounds and the awesome post-processing effects, especially while boosting. All this and the Saturday morning cartoon one-liners from your opponents, and some really smooth menus, which I know isn't a huge deal, but I can't not give credit to games that have snappy, well-designed menus, and Speed Racer the video game immediately charms you into its psychedelic sensibilities. But the actual way the game played didn't click with me at first because the physics are a little bit weird. Like, you sort of bounce off the edges of the track rather than fly off, unless you're mid-crash, in which you may or may not fall off, I guess, and being mid-crash is sort of weird too because you're sent into a spin where you have to both steer yourself along the track and steer yourself out of the spin. It's hard to explain, but it's fairly artificial in a lot of ways. Like, if you've ever played a racer with physics that just feel a bit wrong, then you'll generally know what I'm talking about here. That said, because of the style and the extremely fast pace, I happily stuck with the game and did the tutorial that I probably should have done before diving straight into a real race, and the game revealed itself to be a very smartly designed combat racer. Racing lines and precise cornering take a back seat, so to speak, to what this game calls Car Fu, a set of attacks you can do to destroy your opponents and build up boost. At the most basic level, you can jump to try and Mario-style land on your opponents to attack them, or you can ram to either side with a shunt. Combine these actions with different directions on the D-pad or with a boost, and the combat becomes surprisingly layered. Like, jump while holding the down arrow, for example, and you'll do a backflip, which on its own will earn you boost as a stunt, but attempt a backflip while you're right behind someone, and you'll instead flip their car forwards with your bumper using a move called a tail toss. Hold an arrow to the side while jumping, and you'll do a corkscrew jump in that direction, but if you boost while doing this, suddenly your car is shooting forward as a spinning torpedo. Or just hold an arrow while shunting and you'll instead spin, whipping your opponent out of the way. Control-wise, a lot of cues are taken from traditional fighting games with directional attacks and combos, and it's fun learning the more advanced moves and when to use them. Whenever you get attacked, you lose health and are often sent into that awkward spin that you need to fight to recover from. Run out of health and you explode and respawn way behind where you were. You earn boost by attacking opponents, doing flips, and driving fast without hitting walls, and if you want, you can use your boost to heal yourself instead of actually boosting. It's all a bit to take in, I know, so basically the reason for why everything works so well is because virtually every single action you take comes with a sizable risk. If you use all your boost, for example, you risk not being able to use that boost to heal later if you get damaged. If you flip your car and can't flip it back over, you'll explode no matter how much health you have, so there's always a risk to using boost even if you have full health, because if you explode and respawn, you'll want that boost in your back pocket to catch up. You're constantly balancing survival against speed. And the Car Fu, which is a great name for car combat by the way, also adopts this risk-reward mentality. Like, take the simple act of shunting. There are so many ways a shunt can go wrong. Of course, you can just miss your attack entirely, where you'll probably hit the edge of the track and slow down, but even if you do hit, if you hit an opponent who's doing a spin attack, they'll be the one that comes out on top, and if you do land a shunt properly, you'll ideally want to hit your opponent dead in the middle of their car, otherwise the angles will just send you both spinning. You essentially need to time the attack pinpoint perfectly or it just won't work out that well for you. The same can be said about the jumping attacks. Jumping slows you down, so if you don't land on an opponent, which isn't an easy task, you've essentially just put yourself at a disadvantage. But you can do a flip while jumping, which will earn you boost, so then you're weighing up the risk-reward of whether you need boost or whether you need to maintain speed. And if you're feeling extra aggressive, you can spend a valuable boost to do a torpedo attack, which is fantastic if it lands and awful if it doesn't. Even the more advanced, context-sensitive attacks like the tail toss, which are a bit safer, still punish you if you miss the attack. Put simply, once you've settled into how this game sort of flows and works, which does take a little bit of time, then you'll be consciously and subconsciously making all these micro decisions over and over again while you're playing, weighing up stuff like which attacks carry the least amount of risk, whether it's even worth attacking, whether you should boost or heal, and you're doing this while trying to avoid opponents attacking you, while trying to build up boost, and while trying to avoid obstacles and hit boost pads, and simply trying to stay on the track as you fly through these colorful, chaotic levels. It's very, very engaging, and the high energy intensity of the gameplay begins to match the intensity of, the rest of it. How the game uses slow motion when you land a sick Kung-Fu move makes successfully landing attacks all that much more satisfying, especially knowing all the ways they can go wrong. And another clever thing that it does is let you stack up to 4 boosts, and the more boosts you use in succession, the more exponentially effective boosting is. If you use all 4 at once, you enter this amazing hallucinatory shadow realm and the music goes crazy, and it's essentially the same as using a rocket in Mario Kart, only now you can steer it just enough to smash your opponents to build up even more boost. It's awesome. So there's good motive to use all your boosts at once, which would mean you wouldn't have any leftover boost to heal or catch up from a crash, which goes back to that whole risk-reward thing. And I know I need to stop repeating myself with this, but just on a core moment-to-moment level, Speed Racer the video game truly is a very unique, considered, and clever arcade racer. Like, even looking at how it's a Wii game, they virtually always make the tracks flow quite gradually without sharp corners to account for the limitations with imprecise Wii remote steering, but that's not to say the racing is boring, they just sensibly focused on the combat instead. Of course, you can play it on PS2 if you prefer traditional controls. It must be said though that as engaging as this is, the physics are still a bit too wacky and weird sometimes, and I really dislike how drifting feels and works, though thankfully you never really need to drift. And despite the great visuals and the tight mechanical design, it is a game that is lacking and cheaply made in other areas. They get a lot of mileage out of the same handful of locations by using different tracks within those locations, but you'll very quickly see basically all there is to see visually. There's no real cutscenes or story, and they overuse what feel like concept art sketches for each character. Each character has a vehicle select screen, but they only have 1 car each, which makes it seem like extra cars were cut. There's no online mode, which obviously isn't a big deal these days, but it would have suited the game perfectly. And I think one of the biggest problems with the game is the lack of game modes. You can either race with a single race or in the championship mode, where you unlock new championships as you go, and they're broken up into progressively faster tiers like in Mario Kart. You can think of this as the main mode of the game, and I love how quick the higher tier championship races are, where more opponents are introduced to add to the chaos of it all. If you don't want to race, there is a very basic time trial mode, which is pretty lame because the car combat, or the Kung-Fu I should say, is what this game does well, and stripping that away is just stripping away the fun. And beyond that, there's no other game modes. It's just normal races or boring time trials. Something like Burnout's Road Rage mode, where you have to take out a number of opponents within a time limit, would have been great, or a lap elimination mode or a 1v1 mode, all would have fit in here perfectly and helped break up the game, but instead it's just race after race after race. They try to add some depth to the races with an ally rival system where you can ask to team up with opponents before a race so that they won't attack you, or form rivalries where you get extra boost for attacking your rivals. And while this sounds like an interesting concept, the implementation is completely surface level and it just doesn't really add anything interesting to the game. And sadly, the races suffer from the most classic racing video game problem ever, with some pretty bad rubber banding, where opponents will keep up with you no matter how quick you're going. It's so bad that there's no point spamming boosts to get ahead early or even halfway through a race because your opponents will always keep up. For every single race, you may as well stock up and save the Mega Mario Kart rocket boost, and then use it near the end to overtake all the cheating AI and win the race, and that being the ideal strategy just really sours the game as a whole. But thankfully, it doesn't come close to souring the entrancing state this game puts you in every time you boot it up and carfu the hell out of some dudes with these psychedelic graphics and this hectic music. It may well be on the budget side, but that budget was spent on all the right things with the presentation and the focus on mechanical depth, and in turn they ended up making something surprisingly refreshing and unique. And as a bonus, there's a split screen mode where absolutely everything is playable in split screen, meaning you can co-op your way through all of the championships, which is fantastic. Bring a friend, shunt them into the wall, tail toss them into the sky, and enjoy one of the more underrated arcade racing games around. But wait, there's also a very competent DS port that's also very graphically impressive in its own way. In fact, the courses themselves, which are generally smaller, are actually more detailed, sort of. Like, where tracks in the main version were like flat ribbons flowing through large environments, here the tracks mimic the movie by actually having barriers and overpasses and signage on the track itself instead of in the background. These tracks actually harmonize better with the backgrounds here. They have a better sense of place to them, and they even split off into multiple paths sometimes, which the main game didn't do. For it all to run this smoothly while being this detailed is truly an achievement on the DS. Digging a little deeper than the aesthetics, while this version of the game might look super similar, and while it also has some wonky physics at times, underneath the surface it's actually kind of the opposite game to the main version because racing lines are actually quite important here. Tracks have been designed with a lot of sudden tight corners and hairpins, which is in stark contrast to the main version's easygoing tracks, and thankfully the drifting is more intuitive and less risky so that it's manageable. And as a trade-off, carfu is a lot less important and a lot more simplistic. A straightforward QuickTime event serves as the most effective way of carfuing opponents, and there's barely any risk to attacking. If the prompt comes up for an attack, you may as well do it, because in the unlikely worst case scenario where you do start spinning out, a singular press of the X button will straighten you right back up immediately, and you'll lose virtually nothing from trying it. You don't ever have to fight your way out of a spin here, just press X. Really, a lot of the risk-reward stuff that made the main game so special has been muted or stripped away. You don't have a health bar, so that's no longer a concern as you can't explode. You spend a bar to boost rather than stacking individual boosts, and accelerating is a lot quicker too. You now have more control in the air to do more complex flips to earn boost, which is cool, but even if you screw up the landing, it doesn't really matter. You'll just continue on your merry way and barely slow down. Speed Racer DS, despite its fantastic, colourful lo-fi look, ends up feeling a lot more like a traditional racer, and a lot of the magic is lost simply because the carfu isn't that fun anymore. But outside of the racing itself, this actually has some new game modes and unlocks and depth that the main version should have had. Like, it has Burnout's Road Rage mode, and it fits in here perfectly, and it also has a mode where you must get a high score doing stunts within a time limit. Winning races, winning championships, and doing stunts and drifts will earn you new fans, and with new fans you unlock new cars, races, and events, and I have to wonder if this fans thing and those new modes and all the unlocks were cut from the main version of the game. Unfortunately, the career mode here is way too short anyway, and there isn't enough events with the new game modes, and you unlock everything super quick, but it has the right idea, and all this stuff could have greatly bolstered the main game if it were in there, as well as things like the track splitting into multiple paths, and the more geometrically detailed track design, and more control flipping your car in the air. As it stands, Speed Racer DS is a less unique and a less engaging game, but it feels far more like a finished game, and while it's not interesting enough to really recommend in the same way, it is an impressive and competent game in its own right that does a lot of things that the main version really should have done too. Ultimately, I wish these games were combined into one great game rather than feeling like two separate chunks of the same game, but individually they're still both impressive and fascinating arcade racing games that I'm glad that I checked out. And with that, we wrap up the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Dean Hall, the guy who made DayZ, his first game was actually this Speed Racer game, the Wii one, the Wii/PS2 one specifically, so that's a sort of minorly interesting fun fact. And I also want to mention that there's a PS1 Speed Racer game that came out all the way back in 1996, which looks pretty decent, so if anyone knows if that's worth checking out, please let me know in the comments and I will check it out. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you to all my patrons. If you want to support on Patreon, you can, and you'll get ad-free videos and some other stuff. Yeah, thank you to all my patrons. Thank you to the patrons coming up on the screen, and especially thank you to my $5 patrons: Analog Man, Anthony Gallagher, Anthony Heisel, Aradina Varin, Big J, Boggy Online, Connor Salinas, Daniel Gold, David Melame, Devin Grandal, Dingo Dangle, Dominic Chikoki, Doe Pants, Down the Cat Hole, Evil Chicken, Felipe Magales, Gary Pay, Hazardous Kirby, Jared Kernop, Jay Ghouls, Jenny McGlynn, Kane Ramsey, Kayla Labcat, Lucas Ray Sevic, May Aris Mazaki, Melanie G, Michael Brennan, Minimme prefers shorter Patreon names, Mr. Sunday Movies, Mustache Duct Tape, Oscar, PK Ponky Kong, Peaceful Kumquat, Petersaurus, Pyrrhix, Plague, Ritalin for Kids, Ruth Napperman, Salikin Sekwa, Sam King, Scoos Flinks, Scott Hazlitt, Sky Panthera, Spoofer, Tio, Test Drive Unlimited 2, The Last Great Opium Den, Diego Pereira dos Santos Silva, Tich, Traplaw Ross, Trevor Corbin, Trixie Emerson, Wastelander997, Writing on Games, and Zingdictive. Thank you as usual for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take it easy. Bye.
And look, in case you're wondering what the she in She Interactive means, it's Sidhe. It's a Gaelic word and it refers to fairies and other supernatural creatures who lived under the hills of ancient Ireland and sort of tended to cause a bit of mischief and making magic.